I'm pulling onto my driveway. You'll know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Dive Down Podcast.
Who among us did not start listening to Magic Podcasts with that? I definitely did. Whomst among us?
Ever.
That was one of the first ones I did.
You started listening to Magic Podcasts with Drive to Work?
I think I started listening with episode 1 of Drive to Work. I remember when it started.
Wow.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's fun. It's Mark Rosewater driving to work with somebody, and he does all kinds of
he talks. He's just himself.
Sometimes it's just him, but it's frequently a person rides along with him.
Oh, okay.
So someone has to drive to Rosewater's house and then carpool together. And then that means Rosewater's probably driving them back to his house.
Yeah.
Dinner with the fam.
For board games and such.
So what's everyone drinking?
I have a adult beverage.
I have a Kroger LaCroix.
Stan, I'm glad you asked. I'm drinking Poland Springs water. Have you ever heard of it?
I have an anecdote.
I love that we're doing this for the second time so that you could get it on tape. And that your reaction was
so authentic.
More fake the first time, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
The first time I had Polish Springs or Poland Springs, I was 10 years old. It was my first time visiting New York.
Poland.
And that's like an East Coast bottled water of choice among people on the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't really have, like maybe you can find it at a store here, but it's very rare. It's not ubiquitous
It's
at all.
only at Vinny's.
What do you guys have then? Dasani or something? Like what's your go-to?
Devon, we don't even have water in the flyover states. What are you talking about?
I mean, that makes sense.
We just have a long lead pipe going directly to Lake Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
It's just LaCroix. You just have, like, it's just a ravine of LaCroix, you know?
It is.
All I know is 10-year-old Stan, summer vacation in the Big Apple, New York, City of Lights. I'm given a bottled water called Poland Springs. I take one sip and I just spit it out, like on Park Avenue. And I was just like, this tastes horrible.
Were you in Barney's?
What do you mean? It's water. There's no flavor. How can it taste horrible?
One would think.
There's nothing.
But there's something about that particular brand of water that just doesn't jive with my Midwestern taste buds.
Are you positive that it wasn't Polished Springs, actually, and it was a bottle full of cleaner, perhaps?
It was like Kiwi.
Polished Springs.
I'd hope not. Yeah, I guess most water does taste the same, but like I guess I have some preferences. I really like Evian.
Poof, this guy has preferences, let me tell you.
I like Evian more than Aquafina.
Who's drinking bottled water?
Dasani's fine.
Okay, this is the worst intro ever.
Fiji's pretty good too. Hello and welcome to episode 291 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, my friend. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Rested.
Good. I feel like the episode can only go up from that amazing intro conversation that we had about bottled water.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you guys are so bothered by it. Like, God forbid a guy have an opinion about the taste of water.
I have no opinions about the taste of water. I don't want to continue this
I
conversation.
guess dudes can't have hobbies anymore.
No, you can't. You have a kid. You got 2 kids. No hobbies.
We're disengaging.
Also with us is the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
Hey, it's me.
Hey, Dave.
I got a lot of opinions about water, but I'm keeping it to myself like an adult.
Good.
And joining us from the capital of Poland Springs, it's Dewmwake, a.k.a. Devon O'Donnell.
No comment. All right, no comment.
I was just thinking, Devon, you could make like a custom, like a sport e-gamer, streamer water called Dewwake.
I'm sorry. What?
Dewmwake, like DEW.
DEWM wake.
Yeah, do the dew, as they say.
Mountain Dewwake.
Mountain Dew, yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's just a cross-promotional opportunity with Mountain Dew. Get at us, PepsiCo, I believe, who owns Mountain Dew.
Dewmwake Blast.
Yeah, what flavor would Devon's version of Code Red be or whatever? Devon, root beer Mountain Dew. What would your flavor be?
That sounds rancid.
I know. I'm just throwing things out there.
No, I would have a Poland Springs flavored Mountain Dew.
A product that's much better than that is Heavy Play. It's a card gaming accessories brand. Improve your gameplay. And your game day.
Shane, after 291 of these episodes, I just want to let you know that I'm so impressed by your ability to segue from one topic seamlessly to another.
It's like I turned the page and there was a Heavy Play playmat, deck boxes, card sleeves, little paper things that go in your deck boxes because they all feature enhanced ergonomics, mobility, and protection. These are important things. I like giving these personal anecdotes because it lends credence to this ad drop, right? So I was going through my deck boxes last night, and like many Magic players, I have a variety of things, right? I have brands that I will not throw under the bus because they're perfectly fine products. But then I get to my Heavy Play boxes, and I'm like, there's a subtle sheen to the Heavy Play products that I just prefer. It's not really the sheen. I really prefer them because the EquipMag system allows me to magnetically attach my deck boxes to my dice boxes to other deck boxes. I have like little custom things. I have like, my Pioneer deck that is now banned attached to my dice box. And then the Modern deck, which is probably now banned or has some banned cards in it or is not complete on the other side, carried all around very easily. You can get these products. Hopefully at your LGS, unless you live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, because they do not have them. But if you do live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, you can go to heavyplay.com.
Do we know if they have them in Poland, Maine?
Maybe. Hopefully.
I bet they have them in Portland, Maine, if not Poland, Maine.
But you can use our code, the DiveDown2024, for 10% off of your first order. If you go to any in-person gaming event, they're likely to have a booth over there. Tell them you heard about them on the Dive Down. Stanislav, we got a wild show this week. We have 17 pages of notes.
It's a lot.
And I feel like there's some easy stuff that we got to talk about, right? We got to talk about Modern and Pioneer after some bans.
We have how many pages? I went to bed last night at 11 o'clock, and there were 6 pages.
Well, there's like charts and graphs.
Well, the charts were there.
I added some more charts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's some card screenshots of like from spoilers. So we have the Modern, we've got the Pioneer, we've got some spoilers, we've got some mechanics. We've got a personal anecdote that's not about water, thank God.
Or is it?
There's a lot to do this week. So yeah, dear listener, there's a lot for us to talk about. The order in which it will come to you is TBD for us and for you. But before we get into this week's episode, we have some housekeeping. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to run with this housekeeping.
I would like to talk about the review, please.
Please do.
You do the patrons, Shane, go for it.
Okay. Well, we have 2 new patrons. Throw Away, is that your Christian name? I don't know. And Jason Clark, perhaps the actor?
Do you think?
Stanislav, who is Jason Clark?
You would know Jason Clark if you saw him. He was the nasty attorney in Oppenheimer who was grilling Bobby Oppenheimer.
Oh yes, this person. Yeah.
Mr. Clark, if you're nasty. When I saw the actor, I went, and these names, I thought that it was Justin Theroux, not Throw Away. Threau away. I was like, Justin Theroux? No. Oh no. Who's Jason Clark? Listen, thank you for your patronage. If you would like to support us, you can find us on patreon.com/thedivedown, where even in $1 a day will help you get into our Discord. And there's lots of other swag as well. Listen, I'm going on to the next thing.
$1 a day. That's
$1 a day.
Big,
sorry, that's my NPR mode.
Are you supporting some children who need food?
Yeah, no, sorry, $1 an episode. So
I'll take $1 a day too. Yeah. $7 an episode.
That's 1/7. 1/7 what we're asking for.
It's a deal.
Okay.
Really.
We did get a review, and this is like the wildest review I feel like I've ever seen. The headline is more,
I have thoughts about
more
this one.
standard, please. And then it says, I'm a newer player who doesn't have a collection like many established players, and while I enjoy listening to formats I don't play as much, standard is what got me into it. And it says Hunter 24 in Canada. And then The second half of the review seems to be the text from the beginning of a fitness test of some kind. The Fitness Gram Pacer test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test that progressively gets more difficult as it continues. The 20-meter pacer test will begin in 30 seconds. Line up at the start. Do any of you have any ideas about what is going on with this review?
I have two thoughts.
Okay.
I have two theories. One, it's three theories, really. Okay, one is that this person was going into a Fitness Gram Pacer test and was dictating the review.
Yeah. Siri, Siri, review the dive down for me. In fact, I'm going to turn your volumes up so I can say it. Hey, Siri, review the dive down for me. So all your devices just went off. Hey, Alexa,
Amazon,
do it too. Yeah.
Alexa, order me 500 curved sleeves, please. Only in black. So that's one option. The other option is that this is like some copy pasta from some, cultural touchstone that I do not know what it is.
Yeah, I just searched Fitness Gram Pacer test, and there's a Reddit post from 9 years ago under r/copypasta, and it's just that exact thing. So I'm assuming it's something to do with some sort of copy pasta.
Well, Devon has solved it. My third option was they were just being a wild person and just created this whole cloth out of their mind.
Notice the review is from Canada.
As a streamer, I've heard a lot of copy pastas in my day, and I have not heard this one before. So I may have to steal this one from you, Hunter. So I appreciate the pasta.
I don't get copy pasta when it's bland like this, though. Like, it's kind of funny when it's silly or creepy pasta I really like, but this is just like a technical description of an application. Like,
I like the boop. The boop. Ding.
Yeah, there's got to be a time and a place,
It's like I'm there.
There needs to be a setup.
Right. Thank you, Hunter024, for your review. We also have a store, thedivedown.com/store. You can purchase some items there if you don't want to do the regular Patreon thing. Mana Traders, if you want to rent Magic Online cards, the divedown_4F7 goes to the middle of September. That's pretty soon. The show notes always have the most current code. Well, the code at the time of recording. And then our friends at Rage Gaming give our listeners 8% off with the code DIVE8. There's our housekeeping.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, I want to tell you all, my co-host and the listeners, a story.
I consider this the meat and potatoes of the episode, honestly.
I guess before we get into like the data-driven side of the show.
Boring.
This is the hors d'oeuvres.
This is the mozzarella sticks. I like a mozzarella stick. Why not?
I prefer them.
The barbecue chicken nachos.
To just about everything else.
I got to do something absolutely amazing. And honestly, it was probably a once-in-a-lifetime experience. That as a Magic player especially, I was very, very fortunate to participate in.
And it had little to do with the dive down, if anything.
Next to nothing.
Yeah.
I tried to find applications for the dive down while I was doing this thing. And we found some opportunities, but the dive down is not what got me there. Well, maybe you know what?
In part,
it's all an ecosystem,
right?
In my brand. Guys, I went to Renton, Washington to visit Wizards of the Coast headquarters and meet a bunch of Wizard staff.
Unbelievable.
That's dope.
Luxac.
Did you realize that the term like Wizard staff, it's like the staff of Wizards of the Coast, but also like thou shalt not pass.
There's a lot of sticks throughout their corporate hallways.
How many carats?
All right. So why did you get to go? What were you doing? Why don't you let people know?
I was part of a team of writers and media folk from a variety of publications who was invited for a Duskmorn panel. But it was also, there was some Magic Foundations, there was Duskmorn Commander, and there was also just like a panel discussion with a bunch of Magic senior leadership. That wasn't Duskmorn specific, but just kind of like broadly them sharing stories about Magic and answering questions about the company and the game.
That's amazing.
Sweet.
It was amazing. And, I broke down
once or twice.
We saw the pictures.
There was one point where I actually almost did start crying, and I'll get to that. It was at the end of the night. But I guess I broke down my recap of this event into the actual panels that I participated in and whom these panels were with. So first, let me tell you a little bit about the first thing we got to do, which was called Magic Leadership Team Introductions and Storytelling, roundtable style Q&A. And this included Mark Rosewater, Aaron Forsythe, Mark Hagen, the VP of Collectibles. You've probably seen him on stream as the guy who has a wall of sneakers behind him in his home office. Ken Troop, the global play lead of Magic the Gathering. Jackie Jones, the VP of Creative for Magic the Gathering. And Chris Kuritz, the executive producer of Magic the Gathering Arena.
Wow.
And I sat at their desk.
They brought the stars out. The stars, there's no stars in the sky because all the stars were out for this panel.
At the start of this panel, we passed around a microphone and everyone introduced themselves from the WOTC side and the media side. And when I introduced myself, I mentioned Stan from Chicago, here as a writer for Polygon. I also have a Magic podcast called The Dive Down. So if nothing else, all these people have now heard of the Dive Down podcast.
Wow. Thank you.
No, thank you.
We appreciate it. So what was this? So this has a very soft title, right? Like it's not like a specific thing. So what was in this?
This was Inspiration Hour.
Wow.
I don't know how else to put it. Like, this is just you hearing from people talk about their relationship with the game, how they contribute to the game in their senior leadership positions, and really convey just like all the work that goes into it, all the care that goes into it, provide a lot of detailed anecdotes and like slides in some cases about how certain things get made, and answer questions. So some of those questions I'll actually share with you guys and the takeaways I got from them.
Yeah.
And I guess like at face value, hearing from these people who care very deeply about the game and its success in all of its facets, creative and commercial success, it just truly filled me with a renewed appreciation for Magic the Gathering. As a player, as a collector, as a member of the community, it really made me feel like Magic was truly in good hands. And you know, at one point, someone like asked the question about like sets or cards or you know, decisions that may be quote unquote chasing a buck. Like someone really brought that up. One of the people on the press side. And the thing that like I guess I was really taken with was twofold. One is we were reminded that everything that they do is years in the making. So like this notion of chasing a buck, like it's hard to really anticipate because when things are years in the making, you never know what's really going to come to fruition in a couple of years, like what will hit and what won't hit with the players and the consumers, which I think like in and of itself is a sound argument against that being like the strict motivator of like any type of decisions that go into a Magic release. But then Mark Rosewater himself said something that I think is also true, which is financial success is not a bad indicator of Magic's success in general, because financial success means something does resonate with the players, that they want to actually buy the cards and the packs and engage with a set or the game. So like if they're chasing a buck, they're doing it in the way that all corporations and all consumer products do. But the people who are making the business decisions and the creative decisions behind this business, again, I'll say it, like you could tell, you could see the passion in their eyes. Like they love their job, they love the game, and their biggest driver that I felt convinced by was their goal is to make this game as fun as possible for as many people as possible, which is a difficult task. And I think, like, if we're being really honest with ourselves, like we've seen that really come to fruition with the game's growing popularity over the years, both with standard sets and even universes beyond.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that kind of point put on it, Sam, when you say it, as fun as possible for as many people as possible, right? Is like, we've talked a lot of times about the big tent kind of over the years growing and growing and growing. Even if you just think about since we started this show or since we all started playing Magic, it's definitely, you know, continuing to grow.
This probably is like obvious in retrospect, but for me, one of the things that I was also very struck by was when you hear all these multiple people from all these multiple departments talking about their jobs and how they contribute to the game, like it dawned on me yet again how much colossal work goes into making everything. It's such a complicated, comprehensive organism between the storytelling, between the paper cards, between the digital products. So many things have to come together that, like, this is partially why things have to happen years in advance. But Magic as a game and a company had to mature and elevate to get to this level, to be able to accomplish what they're able to do right now, because they were not able to do this in 1993 when Garfield started.
They probably weren't even able to do it 10 years ago at the level that they're doing now, or 15. You know what I mean? I mean, we're in 30 years right now, so and it's getting more ambitious and bigger every time.
Yeah. And Dave, I think this is something that you'll like relate to and appreciate. One thing that Mark Hagan, the VP of Collectibles, did was he provided a snapshot in how they developed some of the alternate art treatments for Duskmourn. So maybe you've actually seen some of them. There's a treatment in Duskmourn called Double Exposure, where you have like a character and like a different color, kind of high contrast alternative element to the image.
Right.
Designing that went through like tons of iterations to figure out like all the right colors, all the right templating and framing, and they would like print these prototypes, and they shared like some of the actual physical prototypes with us, with how like where they started, what they tried, and how they ended up at the level that they got to. And as you're looking through Duskmourn spoilers right now, as the person listening to this podcast, like there's a ton of treatments in this set especially, and like all those treatments had to go through so much creative iteration and experimentation. And we see this now with basically every set. Like, and that's just one very small side of the design process. And that's just true of all of it. Like, they're doing so much to make this game as fun as possible for as many people as possible. And it's really impressive, like to kind of think about where Magic started as Richard Garfield intended and where it is now. Like, it's one of the big dogs. Like, even though maybe it doesn't have the same cultural resonance as something like Dungeons and Dragons, where like you can mention D&D to someone on the street and they'll be like, yeah, I've heard of that. Like maybe they've seen or heard of Stranger Things, or something about that phrase Dungeons and Dragons, I think is very pervasive in pop culture. There was a movie, but like even before the movie existed, Magic the Gathering as a game like dwarfs the commercial revenue that D&D brings in. And yet it's still like kind of sort of niche as a product within the game community and like pop culture ecosystem. And I think that's something that makes Magic like pretty unique and really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting less every year. But one question I had for you, and maybe before, why do you think they started with this? They bring everybody out there to talk, and it's to talk about Duskmourn ostensibly. Do you think it was like, let's educate some of these members of the press, or what do you think was the idea behind saying, hey, we want you to be inspired by the people who are working on Magic first?
I think it's easy for them to kind of just show you like the press material that like you would get from watching a stream or watching like attending or watching the PAX stream or watching like the official Magic stream. But it's not easy to get like all these people in a room together to communicate to a large audience. And I think they both wanted to educate us. I think they probably knew the inspirational potential. And like, you know, maybe it's almost like a bit of a warm-up act. Like when you go to a talk show and there's always like a warm-up comedian. But like, I think they wanted to make this special for us who are there as guests. And it's like the way you do that is by bringing out Rosewater, bringing out Forsythe, and likewise in some cases introducing us to like people maybe that we don't know, like Chris Kuritz and Jackie, who like have really critical jobs but like aren't as public facing because of their roles in the organization, but just like still have such a big hand in the final product, and can convey just like how important everything is as it comes together, and how much every person at the top of like each department cares about their job and is passionate about their job.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share from this part before we move on?
Yeah, the last anecdote that came to mind was someone in this panel asked a question kind of as a follow-up to the BNR. And it was not about Nadu specifically per se, but they asked a question that I think lots of Magic players have wondered, which is, why do you decide to ban a card rather than printing something as a response to it?
Okay.
And the answer, again, like in hindsight, it's obvious, but I don't think I could have provided that answer if they'd asked me.
Do you think it was a question from someone who actually plays Magic, or do you think it was someone who was more of a press person?
Most, if not all, of the press people there played at least some level of Magic.
I think they would have to, right? Like to even have this beat on these publications anyway, probably, right?
So I know exactly who asked that question. And this is a person who I know plays Magic because I played a game of Commander with them before this panel did.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you ping them with your deck?
I was the pinger. I was playing the pinger deck. Mark Rosewater came out while we were playing this game of Commander and kind of like looked over my shoulder to see what I was doing, and then just was like, shook his head and walked away.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
But the answer was very interesting to me, which is, it comes back to them designing things really far in advance. And when they design cards, they know or anticipate when something's going to be really strong. That's what the Future League is for. Like, we have people in R&D who are playtesting cards, making decks based on things that are in the pipeline, and sort of anticipating like what metagames might look like. So something like Shieldred, for instance, Siege Rhino, Once Upon a Time, whatever. When they identify that something's strong, but they still decide to print it, that's when they might seed answers in those or follow-up sets. Something like Nadu was a mistake. It was something that was missed in testing. So there wasn't anything in the pipeline. If they decided to make a specific reaction to something like Nadu or anything else that's been banned recently, it would be years before we saw it. Yeah. So I thought that was, kind of an interesting insight into the design process and even like the curation that goes into the metagames as part of that design process.
So what happened after that? So you finished that panel, got to ask questions, and then what was the next panel?
We got to see a dress rehearsal of the PAX panel. So if you watched the PAX stream, you essentially got to see what I saw, except people got to like ask the room some follow-up questions. This was with Blake Rasmussen. Mike Turian was present for this portion of the day. Also, the senior art director for Duskmourn, Ovidio Cartagena, was there for this, as well as the senior game designer, Emily Tang, was there for this. And what was nice about this for me was actually they brought cards and products that I got to hold and see in person. So I got to actually see like a lot of these new foil treatments and like the showcase cards that you might get in collector boosters. They look nice. And the new Nightmare Bundle. Have you guys seen this product, the Nightmare Bundle? It's not like the Fat Pack booster bundle that we have. It's a whole separate product where you get like, I think it's 6 booster packs, 2 collector boosters, a couple of posters, and a dice and a deck box.
Yeah, it looks like a TV kind of.
Yes, and the TV is lenticular.
Oh, it's lenticular. Cool.
Yeah. I got to hold that and actually like open one and look at its context. That is going to look very nice on your mantle. And look, I'm not an MTG finance guy, but like this is one that I'm probably going to buy and hold on to. Maybe I might buy a couple, have one for myself and hold another, possibly an investment. Like I think this is a really cool product that people are going to really want once they actually see what it is and what it looks like in person.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It does look pretty sick.
Emily and Ovidio were especially insightful in terms of the importance of story and world design and how that contributes to the actual design of game pieces that come thereafter. And something that I don't know, but maybe this is actually common knowledge, that story and world design happens before anything else.
Yeah.
Like before they come up with cards, mechanics, they are like, we're going to make a set on this type of plane. This is going to be the general theme. Let's start making I think they call it a world book. And they create this detailed tome that's probably like over 100, if not hundreds of pages, that essentially becomes like a master doc for everything that comes after. So when they want to like design an actual game piece, if they're uncertain about anything, they refer back to this very like creative theoretical design reference guide that helps inform like some of the game decisions thereafter.
Yeah, and I think there's a chance. I don't know if it's true that some of these are designed, like they're not necessarily designed in the order that they ultimately come out. I think too, like I don't think it's necessarily a linear, like I wouldn't imagine that it's necessarily a linear process, right? Like maybe they make a couple, they're working on some world documents, they're working on several at a time. It's kind of like movie pilots, right? Like they're in development. One of them they decide to go forward with. There's probably multi-set arcs as well, as we've seen through like Phyrexia, so that dictates some other things. But I imagine it's not like an assembly line, right? Where people are like, well, we do the world building, then we do the pieces, and it just starts over every time. There's probably some give and take in the creative process there, depending on what becomes promising as they investigate it. Especially, the only reason I kind of go deep on this is because you can imagine how that would be a thing for Duskmourn in particular, where the theme of the set seems so kind of new and out of left field a bit to Magic, right? Like this modern horror, somewhat technologically influenced sets. You could see that maybe there were some initial documents for this long ago before they decided they were actually going to develop it into a full world, and even from there into game pieces again. So it's an interesting process.
Totally. With regard to the horrorness of it all, no one at this panel, or I think will ever, talk about the specific movies that inspired individual cards.
Makes sense.
Because it is tricky legal territory. And part of that is because like they have to make everything Magic the Gathering related. Like me as a fan of horror, like I might look at a card and like the chainsaw, like, and that might make me think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? They're not going to say like, oh yeah, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is popular, we decided to put a chainsaw on a card. I don't think they can say that, which is something they like admitted to us, and maybe they would admit that on stream too, which I thought was kind of like funny. Like this is Magic the Gathering's version of a chainsaw that we thought would fit in a horror themed set. End of discussion.
Right. We thought that Ghost Vacuum would be something that would be interesting to you if you're into ghosts and modern horror. We're not going to say whether that's inspired by Ghostbusters or perhaps Luigi's Mansion, but
could be either, honestly.
Could be either. Maybe equal parts both.
All right. So the next panel I'll talk about quite briefly. That was a presentation about foundations. I didn't see a lot. I actually only saw one product. The panel here was the executive producer for the set, Max McCall, the director of game design, Brian Hawley, and senior game designer, Carmen Klomparens. And the coolest part for me here, to be perfectly honest, was actually just chatting with Carmen on the side for a bit. Because she's our era of pro player who's like graduated to WOTC staff. I used to see her at GPs like in the flesh back in the days. And just like on a personal peer level, it was really cool to see her become like a true blue WOTC insider. And from meeting all these other people and then seeing Carmen come out, like you can just tell that she was a perfect fit for the gig. So that was nice. I did get to play with a Foundations product briefly.
Cool.
It was a demo of their learn to play mechanism that's going to come out with Foundations. So it's supposed to be a beginner friendly set, among other things. And when I say among other things, I asked, I think I asked Forsythe during dinner. I was like, hey, Spike to Spike, is Foundations going to have good cards? And he's like, yeah, Foundations is going to have good cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Interesting to know.
Yeah. But like it has a like literally a scripted game where like if you've never played Magic before, you take 2 piles of 20 cards, cats and vampires, and each player follows an instruction manual, and it says like play this land and then this card, and then your opponent is going to do XYZ. So it literally walks you through the tactical elements of a game of Magic, kind of in the way that Magic Arena does as well, in a very like scripted way.
Yeah, like Sparky Duels or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they just done this with paper. But this thing that I'm referring to, this like learn to play packs, I guess you would call them, are part of a larger Foundations box, like a singular product. I don't remember the name of this product. And as I understand it, there's actually no embargo under which I have to abide by to talk to you about it. But the best way that I can describe this Foundations box is a Jumpstart battle box that has like a dozen like Jumpstart-esque packs in it that you can just like pick and choose to. Someone across from you can pick and choose to, and you shuffle them together like Jumpstart, and you play, and then you just put them back afterwards. And it was very, like, not only was it a battle box-esque product, but it's just like a cool way of like turning Magic into a board game without changing the rules of the game. Like, you're still playing paper Magic, but in a package that feels like it could be a board game.
Yeah. There was a product that this reminds me of a little bit. Are you guys familiar with Game Night? Magic Game Night?
Yes.
Right? Where it was like 5 pre-constructed decks that you sort of could play in a group, or you could play with your friends and get out, where it's sort of just like Magic on its way to being like for the board game set, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gave it to my nephew one time 5 or 6 years ago, and he still plays it with it now, and he never really progressed beyond that, but he's still aware of Magic and has a commander deck now, and that's kind of like it, which is great. We want as many people playing as we can, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, were you playing during when Portal came out? Was that like
I
around
was
your time?
playing during Portal. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird product, wasn't it? It seems like this is sort of like their reintroduction of Portal.
Yeah, I mean the
an extent.
major problem with Portal was they tried to make a different version of Magic that was quote unquote simplified, right? That didn't have instant speed cards in it. It had cards that weren't legal. So I think the fact that they're saying we're going to have a foundational product that's legal in Standard, and hopefully the cards in this battle box that you're talking about, this Jumpstart product, because I think that was one of the problems with the Game Night product as well, is that it's one of those things that Wizards does sometimes, where they put out like I have a board game called Explorers of Ixalan, right? That's like a Magic plus board game product, and the cards are like not really legal in the format. Like there's random cards in the decks to make the decks good, but they didn't think about the broader ecosystem in that case. And so I feel like with Foundations being part of it, maybe they are thinking about that a little bit more, would be a good thing.
Because you can literally just like swap your favorite Jumpstart packs into like this product, and it just works.
Yeah, and if you were saying, hey, I want to go, I really love the way that this deck works, I want to go play Standard and know that I can play 4 of this card that I got to try out in the battle box, that's my hope. We don't know that. We'll find out later, but I feel like that makes the most sense for this kind of like acquisition funnel that they're sort of setting up right now. New player acquisition funnel.
Mm-hmm. So that was it. We took some photos. I got a selfie with Mark. Rosewater.
It's a nice selfie.
Mission
You
accomplished.
guys both look great.
Yeah, it's the most important thing.
You guys look great.
Yeah, I'll post that on the internet eventually. And then we went across the street, and I had dinner with all these people. And then I got a picture of me sitting between...
You were at the Applebee's?
The one where the Pioneer bands happened, or no?
Well, I think at that time they were in a different office. They're in a now like really, really slick, fancy corporate park facing Lake Washington. Yeah, it's a really nice part of town. And we walked across the street and had dinner at a hotel restaurant. And I sat between Mark Rosewater and Ovidio, and I got a Wagyu burger. There's a nice photo of me taking a big bite out of my juicy burger while Mark smiles for the camera. But here's the thing I just want to say about dinner. It's God, like maybe 20 people at a long table, right? People are kind of coming and going. We're having some drinks, some appetizers. There's charcuterie. I'm putting meats and cheeses in my mouth, sipping on Moscow mules. I don't know what I was drinking. No, you know what? I was having Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, wow. High roller here. Okay.
I'm glad we're getting this detail.
Yeah,
this color.
Did they try to give you Poland Springs or no?
They don't have it on the West Coast, I don't think. But at one point,
Pacific Mist.
Mark Hagen walks over and sits down in an empty seat right next to me. And he points to me. And I do like the polite thing because I assume... like, he doesn't remember me from earlier in the day. So I'm like, hey, I'm Stan. And he says, I know who you are. The Dive Down. I listen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And he said some really, really nice, really generous things about our podcast. And that was when I almost started to cry. And I told him, I'm like, Mark, if you want me to cry, I'll cry right here.
Right here in front of... You want me to cry in front of Mark Rosewater? I'll
On
do
demand.
It. Yeah.
So that was humbling. Like, I don't know what else to call it. Because,
awesome.
like, as a content creator, and we're small fries. Devon, you're big league. You get invited to like showcases, MTGO showcases.
Yeah.
We're small fries. Like, one time Blake gave us a preview card. That was like a privilege in and of itself. But to hear like someone from the organization just kind of like acknowledge what we do as podcasters and like say that he has heard the show, listens occasionally, and likes it, like that meant a lot. And we do good work here, and people appreciate it from all walks of life, and that was really special. So thanks, Mark, if you're hearing this, and thanks to the listeners who made this possible too.
Yeah. Now, we do have a couple of bits of audio.
That's true.
That Stan has gotten cleared to share from a few of the different staff members.
Yeah, so how about I introduce them each individually? The first one, let's start with the one that maybe is the most relevant for current events. I pulled Blake aside. I wanted to talk about Nadu. So I asked about Nadu. We'll talk about Nadu in Modern for a few minutes. I'm just going to give you one word of warning, the listener. While Blake and I were talking, someone didn't notice we were talking and just walked past us and says something kind of loudly. And it's not so loud that it like overshadows our conversation, but you're just going to hear like a brief moment of background conversation. Just ignore it. Then he and I stepped aside and it was nice and quiet. And yeah, check it out. A lot of band talk lately.
Yeah.
And something that I noticed for this particular band cycle was there was a lot more communication from WOTC staff. Like your weekly streams after a BNR, we'll still address it.
Yeah.
But there was that extra article from Majors. Mara wrote a long post on his blog. Really, the question for me is, what made this cycle different, where you and the team decided to communicate more about what's happening behind the scenes and how you got to this point?
Yeah. What made this different? So, first of all, we banned more cards at this cycle than we typically do at more formats. A lot of the time when we have a banned and restricted announcement, we end up hitting one, maybe two formats, or sometimes none. And so we had changes in 4 formats, and in 3 of those formats, multiple cards. So first of all, just the size of the announcement necessitated a little bit more. Second, we also heard a lot of the conversation, obviously, around the timing of the announcement. And we knew that going into this, because we made the announcement prior to the Pro Tour that we weren't going to make any changes to the Pro Tour beforehand. And so there was a lot of conversation from the Pro Tour and after that put a magnifying glass on our timing. So when you see a lot of the conversation specifically around Nadu, there are multiple facets to it. There's Michael's article, there is the timing, there's how did the card get designed in the first place, there's general conversations around the Modern Horizons set. There is just generally a lot more interest, even going into the BNR announcement, from the community. And so that leads us to want to over-communicate in a lot of these instances. I think in the past we've been shy about talking too much about BNR announcements, and I don't think that's the right tactic. Our fans are going to talk about it. We might as well have the conversation with them. Let's start with each individual piece of communication. Obviously, we're always going to do I won't say always, but we're almost always going to do the weekly MTG show just because it gives additional context and people like hearing the thoughts of the people who make these decisions. Major's article was his idea, and I think that he recognized that as the lead designer of the set, he wanted to stand up and share some more information on that. And I think generally people responded well to him sharing that that additional information. And then from there, they talked about what that additional information meant, and et cetera, et cetera. And then, from there, Rosewater responds to what people care about, what he gets questions about. And so the additional conversation from Rosewater is, anytime he talks about a topic a lot, it's because he's getting a lot of questions. And so I think that was just naturally arising from community interest in it. And then the one thing I will say where we maybe could have done things differently that led to this was there was a lot of built up anxiety around certain cards on the list. So there had been conversation in the community and from us about grief, about Amalia for a while. And I think the more that it's an interesting, I realize I cut off my own sentence there. It's an interesting dynamic where when we are more transparent, we tend to talk about cards that we aren't taking action. We didn't used to do that. We purposefully stayed away from that. And then we saw more value in the transparency in the conversation. The more we do that, this is the flip side, in that the more we say we're keeping an eye on this card, the more we get the question, why haven't you done this already? And when we do it, then those questions re-arise. So some of that is just built up, call it frustration, interest, conversation over time. So I think all of those factors together, again, it was a large announcement, which means a lot of those things can come together, led to a lot of communication this time around.
Last time I got to talk to you, we were interviewing you at the MagicCon Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was immediately after you had done a panel introducing a bunch of upcoming cards, including MH3, Outlaws, etc. And something that you said to us that has stuck with me ever since was that MH2 was a hard act to follow. And I think people would agree that MH3, the jury's still out. Like, we're about to see new life from that set with Nadu gone in Modern specifically. Yeah. How do you feel about MH3 now that we see it, and kind of like the initial impact from some of the decks and cards that have been able to emerge in parallel to Nadu, living up to expectations, your own expectations as a player, and fan reception as well?
Yeah. I do think that there is more time. Nadu overshadowed a lot in Modern. But I think the fact that we've seen a bunch of new, interesting decks of old cards brought to life, even in the face of Nadu, is a testament to some of the cool stuff that Modern Horizons has brought forward, like the red-white energy deck, not only as a player in Modern, but in Timeless, in Historic, and there are a bunch of really cool cards. And energy has not really been a mechanic that's hit in the outside of Standard when it was in Standard. So it's really cool to see that. The Necro Dominance deck is really cool, bringing back things like Soul Spike and giving life to black pitch spells, and it's super cool, and I even saw it win a few RCQs during that time, so it's cool to see that sort of stuff. I think Chthonian Nightmare is another one that we've seen it. People who like the Mardu version of energy or grindier strategies, and I think there's still so much room to find new cool things. We've seen hits of Eldrazi decks here and there, so I think so far MH3 is living up to its predecessors in a lot of ways, and there's still room to see more.
How are you keeping up with Modern? Because you're talking to me like someone who's grinding the RCQs, keeping up with the format. What's your engagement
I pay
level?
attention to everything. I have not played Modern, but I read everything. I pay attention to tournament results, and I get to discuss these formats with some of the best minds in Magic who make these things. So just being around it, you absorb a lot of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now that was Blake. Great, Stan. Now, you have 3 clips from a few other members of the team. Do you want to set up and tell us what you asked them?
Yes. So, I got to share a room with Aaron Forsythe, with Mark Turian, with Carmen Klomparens.
Not like roommates. You made it sound like they were your roommates for seconds.
Yeah, it was like a conference room.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a suite. I had the pull-out couch. It was okay.
It was good. You guys are heading down to the GP. Yeah.
You think they gave me the pullout? I had to ask for a cot from downstairs.
Yeah.
These are like pro players that made it. Like they got to the top of the mountain, maybe in some cases the Hall of Fame even. But what I was really curious, I think for a lot of people, a lot of aspiring spikes, if you will, like there's something to be said about like you're so good at Magic, Wizards want you to work for them. Like, can you imagine like a bigger recognition of skill and accomplishment than that? So what I asked all 3 of them, Aaron, Mike, and Carmen, was what it's like being the pro player in the room when like decisions are made and cards are being designed. And more specifically, like I just asked them how much of their professional experience and that pro player cachet they still get to wield within the organization. So let's just play these clips back to back.
Yeah, and you also asked them an interesting follow-up question each, which was, what do you do with your competitive drive when you can't compete anymore? Which I thought was very interesting for each two. So a little bit of different pieces of content from these 3 as well.
So how about we start with Aaron Forsythe, which is a name I think a lot of people will recognize. He's currently the vice president of R&D at Magic the Gathering, but in his heyday, he finished top 8 in multiple pro tours. And in the year 2000, he played in the World Championships and represented the U.S. team, where he actually was on the team that won the tournament with John Finkel, Chris Beneful, and Frank Hernandez. How much cachet do you still get to wield as a former pro player when you're here? I know you've hired Carmen, you have the contractors. Like, there's a lot of pro players, but like, I think we're the only pro player who is here today.
On the leadership team, a lot. Like, I get to represent a whole perspective that many of them haven't lived that life or engaged in the game with that way. So that helps. It's very helpful to me. Like, I'm one of the few people that is both, top 8 at a pro tour and plays a lot of Commander and casual Magic. I can speak for a wide variety of players. When it comes down to the folks making cards, deciding what numbers go on cards, I'm pretty washed. Like, they run circles around me. I'll bring up something. They're like, nope, that's not true. That hasn't been true in 5 years. I'm like, got it. Okay, you got it. That's why we hired you. I don't need to make that decision. So I'm way outclassed in play skill and intimate knowledge of current tournament decks by a dozen people on my team. But my perspective is pretty unique among the WOTC leadership.
How did you detach that side of yourself when you came here and you were no longer allowed to play? Like, did you come here because that competitive drive was starting to diminish, or did you have to make an effort to not want to compete anymore?
It's a couple things. So the most pressing answer at the time was tournament Magic would give me unbearable migraines. Just like sitting there concentrating for 16 hours or whatever, like, it really would make me physically ill by the end of the day. And like I wanted to succeed, and I knew it was in my grasp, but I was just like, I'm killing myself like doing this, and I was not enjoying it all that much. I love the travel, I love the camaraderie, I love the stakes and the cameras and all that stuff was so cool, and being on internet coverage, like, it's so glamorous, but then like actually having to perform was very, very difficult. But at the same time, like, I couldn't imagine that being a career. Like, I love this game so much. I did want to. How do I do this for the rest of my life? Like, when I first started playing it, the minute I first started playing it, my eyes just went wide. I'm like, this is revolutionary within gaming, and I love it so much. And I feel like I've taught so many people how to play, and I'm like clearly the guy in the group that loves it more than anybody else. Like, how can I turn this into? So I knew that like the tournament scene was going to be a stepping stone. How was I going to get my foot in the door? Mark called me one day and was just like, we have a job, would you be interested in applying? And I'm like, I was still the top of the Pro Tour ladder. It's still qualified for many, many big tournaments. But I'm like, absolutely, I'll step away in a heartbeat because, that's going to be the stability. The tournament scene is very, I won't say random, but like it is, nothing's guaranteed. You could hit up a couple bad patches and you're out. And you got to start crawling your way back up the ladder. And like, I've seen that happen to a lot of good friends of mine. And I don't know that I had that in me. But give me a job, I'll show up every day and give it my all. And it's been 23 years now, and that's how it's gone.
That's cool. All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
Very nice meeting you. Very exciting. So shortly after that, I got to talk to Mike Turian, who is currently the executive producer of Magic the Gathering, and like Aaron, had a really impressive career as a pro player. He won multiple Grand Prix. He won a Pro Tour. He has like a dozen top 8s across various GPs and Pro Tours through his career, and is in fact a member of the Hall of Fame now. I asked Aaron, I'd love to ask you too.
Yeah.
A former pro question.
Okay, sure.
How do you wield that cachet?
How do I wield it? I thought about bringing in my Hall of Fame ring for this, but then I was like, how do I wield that cachet? It's funny because like for the first, I got to Wizards from the Pro Tour basically, right? Like I was teammates with Randy, I was teammates with Aaron. They had joined Wizards prior, and like, oh, they bring on a game design contractor. And so my interview to join Wizards, this is 20 years ago, was going to I think lunch with Randy at a Mexican restaurant. He's like, so we bring in a contractor every year. Normally we interview people, but if you want it, I'd love it to be you. And that was literally my interview to get into Wizards. So to me, how do I wield like that type of thing was like, oh, okay. And then for the first 7 or so years, I was doing card design. And so to me, that connection to, oh, this card's powerful. How do we make this card more awesome? Was really great. Nowadays, because it's more from the leadership side of things, it ends up being, hey, I was on the Modern Horizons team, or like when I was working with Glenn Jones, I was the lead for the Lord of the Rings set, and I was like, Glenn, I'm like, the One Ring isn't awesome enough, right? And so like to me, like I don't do that very often anymore because for one, a lot of times I'm just going to be wrong because I'm just less connected to the pro play. But at times I'm like, we need the One Ring to be awesome. And so, and then he was like, okay, I'll go back, and he got new designs from the team, and I was like, I like this, right? So on occasion now I'll weigh in on a card or two, but most often it's just I can ramp up and connect with the teams faster is a lot of it. Yeah. I don't know. I'm interested. Now I'm sad I didn't get to hear Aaron's answer because I'm sure it was very different.
It was a little different. He mostly talked about how he feels washed these days compared to like Carmen and Rangers and like the young guns.
I will say like when I come in and I play, right? Like there's the part of me that like I shouldn't care about winning, but I do because it's just like baked into me, right? Like to me, winning of course is it's an awesome product. It's fun. It's balanced. Like that's truly winning, but I just have my core is so much in the like. Oh, I really like winning too, right? And value that.
Did you have to detach the competitive side of yourself when you came here, when you could no longer compete?
I definitely did more of that in those when I was a game designer because it was just it's so key. Like typically when I play, I don't play blue. Like it's just, but I need blue to be just as awesome as all the other colors because I know blues aren't the fans' favorite color, right? And so like to me during that time period, I had to disconnect myself more. Now I'll say more re-infused that because I'm thinking about the product. I'm thinking about, okay, how do we add art? What do we want to do to make Dust more awesome? Oh, let's add Arch Enemy to Commander, right? And so, like, to me, that piece, I like to infuse that competitive piece because it drives me to say, okay, we are going to make the set more awesome. I want my set to be the best. What are steps to make that happen? So I'll say nowadays I try to leverage that motivation inside of me, but yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very
so
cool.
there you go.
And then finally, I got to talk to Carmen Klomparens, who's a senior game designer at Magic the Gathering. But as I mentioned, she's like our era of spike player. She used to be in the Rivals League. We used to see her at GPs, and now she's living the dream. sharing those experiences and making cards and making products. Hi, Carmen. As a former pro Magic player, now working inside the chocolate factory,
Yeah.
how do you wield that cachet as a designer and staff member?
So for me, a lot of it is more having an expertise in rate sensitivity. So generally, I am pretty good at telling, or at least eyeballing how strong a card starts or how realistic a shape is going to be in high tier constructed. Some things that are, say, 7 or 8 mana are not always going to hit the top tables of a tournament as frequently, but understanding that more efficient cards or something like that is going to be a better shape for making cards that are going to hit high tier standard means that we can go back to the team and say, hey, these are the cards we should be balancing around. These are what we should expect people to be playing with, because we work so far ahead of where the real world is, right? We're frequently a year, maybe even 2 years ahead. We need to have some idea of what's going on, and we have an entire team of former pro players like myself that do that.
Yeah. And then the one follow-up to that is, I mean, I'm assuming you were a pro player and we were grinding GPs. You love to compete. How do you give up that side of yourself to come here?
It's not free. Originally, at least myself, a lot of what I wanted to get into was more the broadcasting side of things with some independent circuits that I had worked with, and competitive play was more of a means to an end on that side, where it certainly helped me become better at it, because part of the job is being able to interpret the plays that are in front of you. Feature matches are generally people who are winning, you need to understand it and so on. But at least for me, I don't think it's been as big of a sacrifice as it has been for some people that I work with. Not that I don't miss it, especially whenever I end up going to a pro tour, observing, chatting with pro players there. There's certainly a fire to be like, God, I wish I see pairings go up, and it's just like, that should be me. But really, this is just a dream come true, and I love that I get to think about a lot of things in Magic that I would not have gotten to think about in pro play. I love thinking about the breadth of Magic, and so much of competitive play is distilling it down to the singular things that are the strongest. So it's just a different mindset more than it is necessarily, I guess, a sacrifice in the respect that it doesn't feel like a net negative.
Awesome. All right, so there we go. Aaron, Mike, and Carmen, thank you to all three of you. Thank you to Liz Stewart, PR at Wizards of the Coast, for helping organize this whole day. Once again, I felt so lucky, privileged, fortunate to be a part of it. Can't believe I got invited. And that my editor, Charlie at Polygon, actually recommended me for this. So thanks, Charlie. I don't think you listen to the Dive Down, but I am grateful to you too.
Now, just to be clear, a lot of the output of this, if people want you to keep having opportunities in this, like this, and by proxy, for us to have opportunities by what? Secondhand opportunities by osmosis for this kind of content.
Yeah, sloppy second opportunities.
Go and read. Stan is going to have some articles coming out shortly about the content that you heard there. Or
maybe the agreement. Here, I'll share what it's like behind the curtain. My agreement with my editor was I go there and I come up with as many story ideas as I can. I pitch him to Polygon. The story ideas he likes, we'll run. The ones he doesn't, we'll save for later or we'll pass on. Hopefully there'll be some stories to come out of this. And if not, being on the Dive Down, we made the most out of it in our own way.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, go click on Stan's articles if you see him sharing his articles on Polygon. If you like one, leave a comment, all those kind of things. Let that team know that you like Stan being one of the people on Polygon who covers Magic, because he really cares.
I do care.
And he loves it.
And there's an easy way to find my articles actually on thedivedown.com. Scroll down, there's a nice link. Read Stan's articles on Polygon. We hold your hand. We've led you to the well. Now
go read him again if you've read him in the past.
Yes.
Go now. Okay, so that was awesome. Who's ready to talk about
I had an amazing opportunity as well. It was to look at some modern tournament results, summarize them for my friends here on the podcast and all my listeners out there, if you want to keep, if you want me to keep having these opportunities, you should go to patreon.com/thedivedown. Just click on some things that make you give us money, I suppose. No, so we have, there were some bands in Modern. Stanislav, that was an awesome opportunity, by the way. My opportunity is equal, I would say, maybe superior.
Your opportunity to joy is the same if you believe that joy is something we can all access through our lives and actions, daily doings.
Wow. I like where this is going, David.
All right.
That's deep.
You guys want to go a different place now? Let's forget all this stuff. Let's talk about living and
talk about our
actualized
feelings.
life. Yeah, let's talk about feelings. Listen, this is great, Shane.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, so
There was a band
Nadu
last
and Grief.
week. We forgot.
Two
Nadu
bands.
and Grief. Gone.
Gone. Okay.
See ya.
We looked at some data. I got 5 of the 64-player challenges. I figured might as well go for the big ones. And then looked at some 5.0 leagues, found some Cool Decks Inc. Dave did that, by the way. And Dave even played. He played one of these decks that is potentially up and coming.
I'd love to hear what Devon has to say about this deck,
Yes.
too, although we already talked about it a little bit. But
So totaled up all the top 32s, the decks we got. Okay.
yeah.
And here's what we have. We have 13.1% each of Mardu Energy and Boros Energy.
Ooh.
By the way,
Okay.
I cleaned up these decks a little bit. Anything that was named a little bit off, I fixed. This is pretty accurate.
You did? Because I took a look through some of these, too, and found things like the rock that was actually coffers and things like that.
No, there's no rock in my list.
Yeah. Well, you cleaned it up then.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. You meant the challenge data.
Right. I looked at the
Not-
raw
not-
data
not my
as well
pivot
and was
table.
like, what's going on here? And then there's definitely things that are just marked as like Mardu mid-range and things like
Yes.
that are actually energies. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So you got to do a little bit. I mean, Goldfish is good, but they're not perfect. Okay.
Right.
So 13.1% each Mardu Energy, Boros Energy. Then we have a big drop, 6.9% through the breach, 5.6% living end. That's our 4th place deck, by the way. 5.6% living end. Then we have Dimir Murktide at 5.6, Jeskai Control at 5, Eldrazi Tron at 5, Domain Zoo at 5, Eldrazi Ramp 4.4, Ruby Storm 3.8, Amulet Titan peeking its head above water 3.8, Goryo's Vengeance still here 3.1%. Then we get to some interesting stuff. We have Hollow One and Grinding Station at 2.5%. And then I'll stop at the 1.9s. We have Crashing Footfalls
Wow.
and
Awooga?
Dimir Midrange, which is essentially Dimir Murktide, but not with Murktide. So all
Right.
the Dimir Midrange decks are basically Sans Murktide.
We say Sans.
Sans.
Just saying.
Sans.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so we have these.
Yeah. Okay. This is essentially what, 5 events you said that happened after the ban.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think about this? Surprised? Not surprised? I mean, 26% energy is certainly an eyebrow raiser for a number of reasons. So why don't we start there? If I had given you an over/under, do you think you would have said over 20% was going to be combined energy?
Yes.
On week
Yes.
I
one?
probably would have taken the over.
Yeah, on week
Okay.
one, I think you take the over.
Okay. How do we feel about the fact that many of these decks, if not all of these decks, are now fully mid-range villain energy, at least on the Boros side where they are running the ring? Also not surprised?
Yeah, I mean, given how much talk there was about it, what I find interesting is that, at least from the list that I saw, maybe it was the majority, or it seemed like more than half of the Boros decks were on the ring, but it seemed like probably more than like a significantly less than half of the Mardu decks were on it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that is because they have tools to fight against Boros already. Like they have, if more Boros decks are starting to play the ring, they already have Bowmasters, and the other black cards are good in that matchup, like Nightmare and such. So maybe they just feel like they don't need to play the One Ring because they're already advantaged in the energy matchup. So it's kind of interesting to see that play out.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I want to mention is, Shane just went through these brackets. I did find a Twitter post via friend of the show who doesn't know that we're friends, Anil Yahi, who had retweeted somebody named the Confused. I don't know anything about this person, but who had put together a matrix of initial win rates, both of decks in this sample, essentially their win rates and their matchup win rates, which is pretty interesting. And I'm going to tell you one thing right away that makes me not freak out about seeing 26% be one deck, and that is there's a healthy mix of below 50% and above 50% matchups for many of these decks, at least in this person's sample, from the same events that Shane was talking about, is my understanding they covered. It's all MTGO events between 826 and 901. And you can see things like, Boros Energy is 60% against Mardu Energy, but it's 40% against Through the Breach, but it's 27% against Ruby Storm, where Mardu Energy is close to 50%. At any rate, I'm not going to read all of these things, but the matchup list doesn't look like there's a stack of green blocks at the top. It's a mix across all the decks right now.
And I think what I'm seeing here that I think is really critical to mention is that Mardu Energy is a sub 50% win rate and Boros Energy 50.9. It's barely scratching above the middle.
Yeah, these are not controlled for mirror matches. I'm positive about that, which would help figure that out a little bit. When the sample size gets that big, you're going to have things regress towards 50%. However, I do think it's important to note, yes, neither one of these looks like it's crushing at an aggregate win rate according to this data.
These are pretty big confidence intervals too. I don't think this is a substantial data set that this person's working with. I appreciate the effort for sure. I like numbers, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a good indication, mostly in the sense of hey, there's nothing here that says something is crushing everything, is what I thought was the most interesting about it.
I mean, I think what's interesting the most to me is that losing grief in the format opens up the door a little bit more for kind of these maybe over-the-top decks, slightly slower decks. We're seeing good win rates from things like, Eldrazi Ramp, Through the Breach, Living End, Amulet Titan is, 56 in this sample. I mean, it's a small part of the metagame that we just talked about, right? But it's something that I think when you get rid of a card like Grief, it gives people the opportunity and perhaps, whether or not it's warranted, right? And in this data, it looks like it might be. I think we're going to see perhaps the return of these style of decks. And then if they're tuning towards a 20+% energy metagame, then perhaps they'll have more tools to fight against that. I think it's not the widest open metagame in the universe, I don't think right now, but I think it can perhaps, much like when you take out Rakdos Scam, when that was nerfed quite a bit, when you take out the default tier 0 deck, it allows for perhaps a little bit more churn and response to what's going on.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Grief, or how Grief has sort of allowed other decks to come into the fold, and then we're talking about Living End being the fourth most played deck, or
yes, I was surprised by that.
It's so strange to me. And I mean, my experience playing against Living End since the beta announcement over the past couple of days, the Living End deck, at least in my experience, small sample size of course, did not seem particularly great. It seemed like they were not as when you lose Grief, it's not as easy for them to help fight over the sideboard cards. It's at its best when you can go, Grief them, take their Hearse or their Lantern or whatever. But now that you can't do that anymore, you're a little bit more susceptible to those sideboard cards. So it's very surprising to see Living End this high on the list.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that I identify for that is just that in this sample, again, from the Confused, Living End has a 61% win rate, 71% win rate against Boros Energy.
Okay.
Which I kind of wondered if that's one of the ways to it. I think one of the ways you attack Boros is Wraths, right? Yeah. Living End is still the main deck that has Wrath as its main game plan. It Wraths to advance its own plan, not just to reset the board so that it can do card advantage or whatever. So, when I was speculating about, how can we actually attack a metagame that has this much energy in it? Wraths/Living End could be one way to do that, potentially.
I'm looking at Sodex's list So I came in 12th place on the September 1st Modern Challenge, and I notice a couple copies of Flare of Denial, and from clicking around a handful of other Living End lists, I see Flare of Denial popping up. Any clue how we're playing Flare of Denial?
Shardless Agent, I guess?
Yeah, I assume we're using... I mean, almost all the creatures in it are blue. So once they get into play...
They're expensive, though.
Yes.
Shardless doesn't hit the board before you cascade. Like, all those things happen on the stack.
Right. I think it's protection against you getting wrathed after you have cascaded.
Oh, no, I think I figured it out. So
Okay.
I think the concept is, say you Living End, and one of like a lot of people's plans against Living End is just untap and just cast the One Ring. And maybe that's the theory, where you get a creature, you get the Shardless Agent to protect against the One Ring, and then you guarantee have a kill shot the next turn. So I think maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get. It was just like you, and maybe it's not a wrath, like you said, Devon. Maybe it's the One Ring is the better target for it. But it is something that you can have up after you have cascaded on a turn where you maybe don't have mana.
Right, because maybe what you're not really worried about as much, especially not in game one, is people disrupting your cascade plan. It's really people keeping you from winning after you've done the thing.
Are they also playing it instead of Force of Denial? Or Force of Negation? Sorry, Force of Negation.
No, I'm still seeing 4 Force of Negation, but like we lost 4 grief. We got to fill it with something.
Right. So what they're doing is they're adding more disruption that they can play after their plan is executed, in addition to Force of Negation. Because you can Force of Negate a ring or a Wrath, too.
Yeah, and because they're also cutting the blue-black cycler that...
Architect
of Will. Thank you.
So anyway, I think there's a chance Living End's going to do a little better for a minute than we thought, just because the meta conditions are good. Why don't we go through some of the rest of your notes about these other decks, Shane? You don't have anything else to say about Through the Breach, right? We talked about it a lot the last couple of weeks. It's the third deck in this sample.
Yeah. I think it's a good deck. Like, I mean, yeah, it's strong. It does what it needs to do.
Yeah, if anything, I'm like impressed that Through a Breach is more popular than Jeskai Control, because I thought that was like Jeskai, Nadu, and Energy were like the big 3 for a long time.
I think people secretly consider it not a very good deck in the end.
You mean
Jeskai?
people think Jeskai's overrated for the 500th time in Magic history?
I think
dude.
Dimir Murktide might end up being like the fun police deck of the format.
I think that deck is very good. I've played against the Murktide-less one, and I've played against the one with Murktide recently, within the last week. And the thing that caught me this last time is they have mana disruption main that I don't remember seeing in lists before, including Spreading Seas, 4 Spreading Seas, and somewhere between 2 and 4 Harbinger of the Seas as well. So we're seasoned people. We're turning things into islands.
Yeah,
I mean, at what point
Arena
do we
of
just become a
Glories.
Dimir Merfolk deck?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. Except for they don't have a 8/8 flyer Merfolk. True. Maybe someday. Coralhelm Commander, come home. But I think this deck is good. And I think the reason that this deck is good is because I don't know if Nadu going away has anything to do with this, or if it's just a card who I think his time has come in Modern. Psychic Frog is very good. And we have not talked about this card very much since Modern Horizons 3 came out. I played against it in the last week in both Dimir Murktide and in Goryo's Vengeance. Guess what? That card does a ton of work and is just a really good threat. The Ophidian ability is like sick that it has. The fact that you can give it flying. I mean, all the parts on the card, just like it's designed to do, certainly is a linchpin for this kind of like tempo-y counterspell strategy that I like. I don't know if I like. I would like to be able to think I'm good enough to play it, but I just think the card is very good, and I think we're going to see more of it.
Yeah, and part of why I think the card is so good right now is the energy decks are loading up so heavily on the damage-based removal, Lightning Bolt and Galvanic Discharge. Now, Discharge, it gets a little hairy, because if you discharge and they discard cards, then you would just choose to not use the energy and bank it for later. But, you know, TLDR, they're leaning less in on Static Prison and more in on the red removal. And as that happens, threats like Psychic Frog and Murktide Regent become so much better because they're just almost unkillable in a lot of those situations.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting that nowhere near close the energy consolidation of like 26%, but like Eldrazi decks in various forms is like 15% total of this meta, like Through the Breach, Eldrazi Tron, Eldrazi Ramp. So just sort of different ways of playing different Eldrazi. Whether it's like a Karn lock situation, whether it's like an Emrakul situation. I forget what Eldrazi Ramp actually goes to. One of the Ulamogs, I believe, sometimes. So the Eldrazi package and the cards that were printed into the format specifically to make this stuff happen, I think is definitely holding its own, and the win rates look pretty good too. So
randomly worth mentioning that Ulamog has become a target for Goryo's Vengeance as well in those decks, along with the Traxa, is what it looks like to me. It's the newest one is the Defiler.
The Defiler is wild. Like just when we talked about this before, but it's sometimes better than Emrakul.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit because I have stuff to say about Goryo's Vengeance after playing it multiple times in the last week too.
Yeah, Goryo's being around without grief is mildly surprising. I think, I imagine people like me who do not play Goryo's Vengeance were like, well, probably won't see that much of it anymore. But, it was a 4 of in the deck and now it doesn't have it, but seems just fine.
Devon, can I ask you a question? Because I was not tracking Goryo's Vengeance before. What I saw was 4 Emperor of Bones from Modern Horizons 3 in the decks that the 2 Goryo's Vengeance decks that I played against both had that. I swear, and maybe I was just delusional at the time, that one of the decks I played had only Emperor of Bones and no Goryo's Vengeance in it at all.
I don't know about that.
I don't know either, right? But I surgical extracted them and got to see their whole deck and was like, I don't think there's any Goryo's Vengeance in this deck.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen that particular version. Most of the lists that I've seen, and I played one myself too, that I think I had 1, maybe 2 in some lists, but I never had more than 2. I think, part of it is you really just want Goryo's is a little bit better because there's like a weird timing thing with Emperor where you have to, the turn you play it, you have to have the creature in the graveyard. And you can't end of turn, if you have 4 mana, for example, you can't end of turn Indulgence, discard creature, and then immediately get it back with Bones because you have to wait until your turn to exile the creature. So it's a little awkward in that regard. But yeah, no, I is going back to what Shane was saying about just Goryo's being around with grief. Not only are they still a deck without grief, they're still playing 4 Ephemerate, which is wild to me. And they're playing less Solitudes.
Right. I mean, Ephemerate's not bad with Emperor Bones because of what you said. You can flash them in to redo the animate effect again, right? It gets rid of the counters when they go away, so you can adapt it again, right?
Yeah, and I believe the text on Emperor of Bones, it puts a finality counter, so I think what you can also do is Emperor of Bones the creature back, attack with it, and then ephemerate the creature to keep it around, similar to Goryo's Vengeance.
Yeah, that totally makes sense as well. Yeah, here's a list by Trisky that I'm pretty sure this is pretty much the list I played against. 4 Emperor Bones, 4 Psychic Frog, 2 Solitude, 4 Atraxa, 3 Ulamog, 4 Ephemerate, 4 Goryo's. So I said, I couldn't find any record for one that didn't have it, which was what made me feel like I was just making things up. But it was not playing Emperor of Bones before Grief was gone, right? This is the card that is maybe replacing Grief.
They were maybe playing 1 before, but tops 1 max.
Yeah. But it just feels like, we found a thing. Now we have space for more backup Goryo's Vengeances in Emperor of Bones is kind of what it is.
Kind of makes sense, right? Instead of leaning on that secondary angle of attack where it's, I'm going to interact with you early. Instead of interacting with you, I'm just going to keep shoving my combo every single turn until you can't answer it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me when I was playing Hollow One, where if they land it, there's literally nothing you can do against these cards if they land it against Hollow One, for example.
You were playing what, Dave?
I was playing Hollow One this week. So, that is the next deck on the list here.
Ooh.
I have a good amount of stuff to say about Hollow One.
Spill the tea.
Well, the first thing I want to say is...
Did you lose a bet?
I like Hollow One, or I did a long time ago, back when Faithless Looting was around. But actually, the thing that made me try it this week is that Anonymous, I guess, MTGO Legend Selfie Sec the person who was one of the original innovators of the Mardu Pyromancer list a zillion years ago and has occasionally popped up with many random lists over the years. A person who, again, I don't think anybody necessarily knows who they are. Played Hollow One this weekend, came in 6th place in 2 challenges and put 5-0s in 2 different leagues this weekend with one list of Hollow One. And here's the thing. I talked about this deck a couple of weeks ago. I played it on the show. It was missing one card that I think is actually very good in this deck. And this is Everett actually brought this card to the deck, and that's Nethergoyf. Nethergoyf, very, very good in hollow play off of discards with no problem at all after you accidentally discard live cards from your hand via Burning Vengeance or Goblin Lore. So the engine that's in here these days, Detective Phoenix is the other card that's really huge that I actually think is quite good at this point after playing it for a while. So Detective's Phoenix, that's the Bestow elemental that has Collect Evidence 6. It gives haste and flying, a +2/+2. So what's left in this deck is Dragon's Rage Channeler to help get things in the bin, Nethergoyf, Orcish Bowmasters, Phoenix, Hollow One, 4th Street Wraith, Ox of Agonis, and then your discard outlets. I thought that the core made a lot of sense, but playing Hollow One, as we were talking about earlier, Devon, before we hit record, you can just run so bad. And I'm not someone who wants to like talk about bad beats, but I had Burning Inquiry and Hollow One like 5 or 6 times in the matches that I played on turn 1, and I never played a turn 1 Hollow One. Never had a chance to. I discarded it every single time. And I don't think that it's wrong for me to keep spamming that. That's what the deck is supposed to do.
No, you have
to. I don't think I'm not supposed to hold up interaction, right? I'm not supposed to I even don't think I'm supposed to play Dragon's Rage Channeler if I have a Dragon's Rage Channeler along with a Hollow One and a Burning Inquiry. I think I'm just supposed to spam the Burning Inquiry and see if I can get Hollow One into play. I mean, what do you think about that, Devon?
No, I mean 100%. If your opening hand has Burning Inquiry, Hollow One, I mean, I guess the only exception is like maybe if you want to play a Nethergoyf on turn 1, and then the theory is that if you miss, you can at least attack for like 4 or 5 with Nethergoyf. But I mean, it's if you have one, I don't know. Maybe we have to get the hypergeometric calculator. I don't know what the odds are. But, my experience was very similar when I played a league with the Hollow One deck. I think I cast turn 1 Inquiry like 4 or 5 times. Maybe I think it was 4 times. And 2 of those times I discarded 3 Hollow Ones. Like, it's just it's going to happen. And, you just kind of have to take the good with the bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Hasn't this always been true of Hollow One, though? Like,
yes.
Since the glory days.
Very, very high roll casino deck.
And the truth, though, is that this deck has better tools to actually still do something when you totally whiff on Burning Inquiry, because you have so many cards that you can play from the graveyard over and over again. And that's the thing that's wild about Nethergoyf and Detective's Phoenix, is that as long as you can collect, it's not like it gets exiled after it dies. You just get to escape it again, or you get to collect evidence it again. And that's really powerful. And honestly, it's powerful enough. And we're not going to talk a lot about this deck, but I left my league being like, I think I went 2-3 in the first league that I did, and then I lost a couple other games of another league, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this. Those 2 cards together made me really want to play something with that. And then I found the challenge from the second or first, or not a league from the second or first, where 3 different people got 5-0s with Rakdos, Death Shadow, with Inti, Detective's Phoenix, Nethergoyf, actual interaction cards, no Hollow One stuff. And that's the next thing that I really want to try, is just kind of going like, okay, can we just play like Rakdos, aggro-y Shadow with these cards that just reward us for coming back over and over again, and also maybe make our Death Shadow fly sometimes.
Yeah, that was kind of my exact experience when I played that deck too. Is I wasn't necessarily a fan of the Hollow One stuff, but this is kind of the first time that I had really ever tried out Detective's Phoenix, and I was wrong on that one. I wasn't sure exactly how good it was going to be. I don't remember how much we talked about it during spoiler season, but that card's good. It's really good.
It is. It's good. It's especially good. I mean, it is good with Hollow One because Hollow One is also a 5, so it makes it easy to cast Phoenix from your graveyard. But it's very good with Street Wraith. It gives you a reason to play Street Wraith in your deck again because you can cycle it. It's 5. It gets you a long way to being able to collect evidence for it. And it's good. I won games off of the first 3 matches I played. I won 2 of them, and I was like, this deck is sick. And then after that, it was just like bang, 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 bang. Having a flying Nethergoyf with haste is truly a delight. All right, that's my thoughts on Hollow One anyway.
Hollow One.
Yeah, I definitely need to mess with this deck just for kicks. Scratch some lottery tickets. We also had some Grinding Station appearing. Looks like this is a ring deck now. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing here is that it's powered up by Malevolent Rumble as well, which is a card that's very good with Emery as part of that too.
This is a card I feel like is better than a lot of people expected. It's seeing play in like the Eldrazi ramp style decks. I've seen it in I think some other just in the, like you said, this deck. Rumble's an interesting card.
It's way better than we thought it was. Way better in the sense that we didn't even talk about it really in the spoiler episode, and it's much better than that.
So good.
Yeah. The fact that it puts the cards in the graveyard, which is something that's very easy to miss, is just mind-blowing.
Let's talk a little bit. I mean, Crushing Footfalls, I should mention at least, is still, it's basically just, 4 or 5 color footfalls. It's doing the thing. Yes. Probably not great. Probably okay. You can play with it if you want.
I want it to be good, though. Come on, just let me have this one thing, Shane.
You can. Go for it, man. I mean, it's running Flage. You get to run Flage.
You know what it sounds like to me, as we're talking about all these decks, is that Modern has room for decks that are just okay again. All those just okay decks were pushed out of the format by Nadu and maybe Grief, and now we have this nice burgeoning tier 3.5.
I don't know if it's 3.5. I do feel like it's probably a bunch of tier 2. Let's not be too harsh on these. They're showing up all over the place. We'll see where the metagame stabilizes, but I think it's more like tier 2 than it is 3.
Okay, great. That's even better.
Yeah, even better.
I do want to mention that, speaking of the One Ring, it's basically in about 45 to 50% of all the top 32 decks in these challenges. Even Energy, like we mentioned, is often running it. Orcish Bowmasters, the Lord of the Rings partner in crime card here, is also seeing really heavy play. It's in 30% of each of the top 32s. Flage seeing heavy play about even with Bowmasters. So these are the power cards, maybe the power trio of, if you're looking at the big bangers of Modern right now. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to mention quickly is as I was looking through 5.0s, I kind of incorporated most of my notes of things that I thought were interesting above, including Rakdos Shadow and stuff like that. I did find there are tons of people who are looking for the next creature combo deck that they can play. I've seen some people say that Yawgmoth is pretty good again. I didn't see a lot of evidence of that breaking back through quite yet, but I believe it. I did, however, find 3 different decks that we haven't talked about much that are trying to move into that creature combo space. One is Brood Scale plus Heliod, which is something that Mickey from our Discord was playing a lot. Got a 4-1 with. I haven't seen a bunch of other people picking up, but it's pretty interesting because it's Springheart Nantuko and Ocelot Pride in a Heliod shell, just making tons and tons of tokens, gaining a lot of life, doing all kinds of interesting stuff. There's, of course, Soul Trader combo that is kind of all over the place as well. The Warren Soul Trader, which I'm noticing in each of the league dumps has people getting 5.0s with that. And then the last thing is, a couple of days ago, somebody got a 5.0 with a Sam combo, like a Sam Gamgee combo that had, I put this under the "but you don't even go to this school" heading, which is, it was Amalia in a Sam combo. I was expecting Rosie, and instead I got Amalia in Modern.
Only 2 mana? That's aggressively costed.
Sure, and but somehow we're still playing 4 Wild Growth Walkers in Modern in this deck.
We found some things for Shane to do with his Amalia cards.
Yeah, just get some Sams, Shane.
Perfect.
I'm glad you're happy.
I mean, if I can play Cenote Scout, Lord knows I'm happy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Here we go. Oh, it's a birthing ritual deck, by the way. That's the thing that seems to be one of the big engines inside of it.
Yeah, when I saw this list, it was interesting. There's no collected company, but I think it's because there's less 3-drops. It's like more all-in on 2s, which probably makes the birthing rituals better.
Yeah. So keep an eye out. People are trying to fill that creature combo space already.
Like, this deck sort of used to exist. There was a deck that used Samwise and that
Rosie,
but it also had that like MH2 artifact that like made versions of every token that you don't make.
Manufactor.
That you Academy Manufactor, yeah.
Is there something similar here? Is that what's been replaced, like the Rosie Manufacturer package? Or is this a different combo
think so.
altogether?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's similar. It's just replacing it with Amalia. So there's stuff afoot in Modern.
All right, so we had discussed Malevolent Rumble a little bit earlier, and, I thought to myself, well, Boros Energy, pretty good deck. Let's see if we can maybe add a third color in there. The list originated from, I saw it was JPSN54, who is, a constant user or a constant chatter in my Twitch chat, so he and I had a couple conversations about it, and he liked the deck a lot, and I was like, all right, let's give it a shot, and ran it in a couple leagues and then do a little prep and ended up running it in an RCQ over the weekend. As far as, splashing for Malevolent Rumble, it sounds kind of weird where you're sort of like splashing this, like it doesn't seem like a card you would necessarily want to splash for. But I think the reason it's so powerful in this deck is because, as Dave alluded to earlier, the cards go to the graveyard. So if you rumble into a Flage, it's almost like you're drawing an extra card because you're cycling off of the rumble, but then you're getting a Flage into the graveyard that you can then utilize later on. So you're not, it's sort of like you're getting an extra card. And a lot of ways that these energy mirrors sort of play out is most of the time, sometimes one player will run away with the game. They're on the play with God of Souls, Ocelot Pride. Other player misses a beat. That happens sometimes. But a lot of the mirrors end up going really late into the game, where both players just start flaging each other, right? Where you play Flage, I play Flage, you attack, I block. We do this for a couple turns, and having the ability to use Rumble to sort of give you an instant escape 5 to get that Flage back gives you an extra, like, sort of small layer of advantage because you have an extra casting of Flage. So you are less likely to run out of cards before they do, and, so on and so forth. So that's kind of like reason number one.
It's like Grizzly Salvage.
Yeah.
Kind of, when you think about it that way.
Right. Yeah, so that's sort of like, kind of the baseline why you would want to play it. The spawn token comes up sometimes, right? It is a Guide of Souls trigger. It's an extra creature for Goblin Bombardment. Both of those things matter. It can sort of... It is awkward that the colorless mana doesn't flash back Flage. So that's, there's a little awkwardness there. But it can get you to, faster Gigantha. I should be playing the One Ring in my deck, but unfortunately I sold mine maybe 6-7 months ago. So I don't actually have them. But if you were to play the correct version, or in my eyes, the better version of this deck that had the One Ring, Rumble not only finds Ring, but it ramps you into the Ring as well. So it lets you cast it on turn 3, which is pretty huge, especially if the energy mirrors start becoming more about the Ring.
What would you take out of this deck to put 4 One Ring in? Do you take out Thraben Charm, Static Prison, Blood Moon, and Ragavan main, or what's your...
Some number of those cards, yeah. I think I want to play 2. I think 2 feels like the right number, maybe 3. The Ragavan and the second Fable, I think, is what I would start. And then maybe if you wanted to play a third, maybe like you said, the Thraben Charm or the Static Prison. But I feel like 2 is maybe where I'd want to be, because Rumble finds it too, so you don't have to play as many copies because you have more. That makes sense. You can dig towards it. And then the other really important thing about Rumble is, so once you get to the sideboard games, a lot of Boros' really bad matchups get sort of fixed up a little bit by those sideboard cards like Damping Sphere, Blood Moon, Sun Cleanser in the mirror match, things like that. And the thing about the sideboard cards is you want to find them early and often. And Malevolent Rumble helps you find those sideboard cards. It digs you 4 deeper to find that important sideboard card, find that Blood Moon against Tron to make sure that you are more likely to have it on curve. Because those sideboard cards, as the ones I described, they're kind of time sensitive. Like if you're playing against Tron and you don't have Blood Moon on curve, you're probably just going to get buried. So you really need to have those sideboard cards on time, and Rumble helps you do that as well. The Green Splash doesn't just give you Rumble, it gives you Haywire Might in the sideboard, and as we sort of move more into the One Ring dot format, Haywire Might kind of helps a little bit in that regard, and Haywire Might also, findable off Rumble. That's something you can cast off the spawn token. It's cheap, it's, it's a 1-drop, triggers Guide of Souls, all that stuff. There's a couple of other interesting cards that I want to point out really quickly here. So Invasion of Gobakon, right?
Yes.
If you have been playing any Pioneer or Standard lately, you might be familiar with this card, and you might ask yourself, what are we doing? What the heck is this card doing in Modern?
Devon, I literally asked you, what the heck is this card doing in Pioneer, like, when I was in Manchester?
Yeah. Maybe it's actually better in Modern? I don't know.
I don't know.
So the concept behind this card is playing it. So you want it against a lot of the One Ring decks, because taking their ring and making it cost 6 as opposed to 4, there's a huge difference between that, right? A lot of these ring decks are really reliant on casting it on 4 on curve to get that protection, untap for a turn, and go about their business. So if you make it cost 6, that gives you 2 full extra turns of combat before they can even get their protection turn. That's huge, right? The other sort of layer of it is against specifically Jeskai. They're in, I guess even some of the other decks that have ring also have sweepers, but a lot of these decks are leaning on sweepers as their sort of sideboard plan of choice against Boros. So if you flip the Invasion, for those of you who don't know the back half, it's a battle that starts with 3 loyalty, and the backside is gives all of your creatures that attack a +1/+1 counter, and you can sacrifice the Invasion to give all of your creatures indestructible and hexproof. So the plan against Jeskai is you cast it, you take their ring, which buys you sort of 2 turns allegedly, and then you immediately flip the Invasion, which then also gives you protection against Wrath. So it sort of gives you like this dual layer threat, and it is really good in the post-board games in that matchup. So that's kind of the idea there.
And you could play this outside of Naya. You could just play this in Boros. You can play it in Mardu.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah,
honestly, I think that after playing it this weekend, I played a couple leagues with it, the RCQ, I'm kind of a believer on it, and I may want to try it in other energy shells as well.
And what are you replacing? Is it just Ragavan, or like what would you cut?
So it's in the sideboard. I'm trying to think. Right. Yeah, I think that we're not playing Celestial Purge in the sideboard, which I know with a lot of the Boros decks play, so that card has been cut, and then I'm trying to look at. Just going to give just the
Harsh
most
Mentor.
recent Boros deck that I
we
can
don't need Harsh Mentors anymore.
Yeah,
True.
like this list has, I think, 1 extra piece of Graveyard Hate, a Wear Tear. That's the other one. We're not playing any Wear Tears, so that's probably what will replace the Wear Tears.
Devon, you got a cheeky Supreme Verdict in the sideboard here too.
Oh, don't worry about that.
To mention, don't worry about
it. That's the 16th card. It's not actually in the sideboard.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
That was just the promo. Just putting that there.
Got it.
The last card that I want to bring up here, which I don't know if I can't remember if we brought this one up during the spoiler episode, is which one I believe Dave alluded to earlier, Threebin Charm. So I'm going to read this one because a lot of listeners may not remember what this does. So it's White Nicholas, instant. It's got 3 modes. The first mode is you choose a creature, target creature, and the Threebin Charm deals damage to that creature equal to twice the number of creatures you control. Second option, destroy target enchantment. Or third option, exile target player's graveyard. So, a lot of utility there. The main idea is the mirror match, where it is the exiling graveyard, good against Flage, helps you, sort of stay ahead in those Flage fights. The disenchant, or the destroy enchantment, blows up Goblin Bombardment and Fable the Mirror Breaker, and people who are now playing Chain of the Rocks. So 3 premium targets there. And then honestly, the most important part of the card is the damage half, because the mirror matches come down a lot to Sun Cleanser. Like, who can keep Sun Cleanser in play? You got to fight over that card because it just shuts off so much of the deck. And you can imagine if you're playing 4 Discharge, 3 Lightning Bolt, don't have a lot of answers to Sun Cleanser, and Charm is another way to do that. I've seen lists play more Static Prisons, but my experience with Static Prison has not really been that great. I don't know if any of you guys have any opinions on Prison.
I mean, I've loved it when I've played it, but I haven't played Energy in a month, so it'd be tough for me to say like where it is now. But the first, like that initial burst out of Modern Horizons 3, I was like, yeah, this card is decent for sure. Stan, what about you?
It's hard to cut. Like I too, I just haven't played Modern since the ban, but too busy jet setting in the Pacific Northwest. But I do feel like because it's just a catch-all answer, like you can't run none. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
If you want to go down to just one, like because you have better technology else in those slots, like I think that's acceptable. But like going down to 0 just like feels wrong because it gets you out of so many jams when you need it to.
Yeah. And that's kind of exactly why, like you mentioned, I still have one copy in the deck list, which is sort of a concession to exactly what you said. Like I want to have access to it because it is such a unique effect. But my issue was the games where I drew 2, it was actually really hard to keep multiple in play because you want to be using energy for stuff like Gad of Souls. Sometimes you have to discharge an X4 or an X5, and you just kind of find yourself a little bit down on energy. So that's like why I haven't tried Chain to the Rocks myself. 'Cause I've seen that's kind of technology that's picking up recently. I think I want to say it was Dingo who started it.
Yeah,
he's maybe the first person that I saw.
Yeah.
So I've seen some Chain to the Rocks in sideboards. I think it was maybe Dingo who started it, and I haven't tried that card myself. It sounds kind of interesting, so maybe that's something that I want to explore as well. But yeah, I've liked Thraben Charm. It is 2 mana, compared to the other 1 mana spells, but being able to the Disenchant and the Exile Graveyard, like those modes come up quite a bit on this card. I exiled quite a few Flages over the weekend.
I want to say randomly with that in mind as well, like when I was playing Hollow One, definitely not enough graveyard hate in that particular build that I was looking at. I feel like we all need to find lots of room for incidental graveyard hate in our decks in Modern right now between Flage, between the Reanimator decks and Living End and all these things. I think there's a lot of stuff, and even Hollow One, and there's lots of things out there that you can attack the graveyard or be a pain in the butt if you attack someone's specific cards there.
2 mana is not too much in this deck, especially.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a lot of 2s, right? The Raptors, the Johnnies, like Bombardments, and the Rumbles too. So it is like there is a big difference between 1 and 2 mana when you're comparing it to something like Prison. But the specifically the flexibility of just being able to exile graveyard, like I drew it against Living End, for example, and they're never going to play around it. I had a game 1 against Living End. Who's going to play around that? And they're just like they went for their Living End, and it was just casted, and it was kind of easy. So it catches a lot of people off guard, and I think the one of in the main felt like a pretty sweet spot.
All right,
Devon, you know why I love you.
Why do you love me?
You're in this fortunate position where you get to like share anecdotes like this, and Shane doesn't accuse you of being rowdy. Whereas if it were me, you'd be down my throat.
But that's all I got.
That's awesome, Devon. You think you would try it again or no?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm gonna spend some time on this one.
Okay.
Maybe I'll try to acquire some 1 rings for next time. Maybe that'll help me in my against my. I ended up losing in top 8 the amulet. I got 2. My just real last funny note. My amulet opponent drew all 4 1 rings in game 2, and he chained them in back-to-back turns. And I didn't. I think I took a 3rd turn, then I didn't get another turn. So
wow,
it was interesting. But yeah, no, I would try it again for sure.
That's awesome. All right, bottom line on Modern, I'm not worried from what I saw, even though it's 26% energy. I know you haven't played much, Stan, but...
No, but the data shows like promising shifts, evolutions, and things are changing. I would actually even like quote something I heard on the Jerry T podcast featuring Dave Shields. Dave Shields was like, if we can't deal with a deck like Energy, we're just not trying hard enough.
Okay. Fair enough.
And I think that's probably what the future holds, of like probably some kind of balancing act will happen if this remains the best deck in the format. Or if it is the best deck in the format, like a Lord of the Ground aggro deck being the best deck in the format, like not a terrible place to be.
Devon, are you worried? You think we're going to get to a better place?
I mean, I kind of agree with Stan. It's just people. This was the week 1 de facto best deck. People, it was just going to be everywhere, and I think it's just we'll adapt to it. Just play some more Wraths. That's all.
Shane, I know what you're worried about. can I tell you what you're worried about? And it's not this.
This is a 2-hour edit I have.
Yep. And here's what's going on. I'm taking control of the podcast right now.
No, I'm taking control of the podcast.
Okay.
Right now.
Whoa.
Cut.
Yep,
We're done.
We're done. Yeah,
We're done.
I agree. We were going to
Love
talk
it.
about Pioneer. We were going to talk about Duskmorn. We're not doing that this week. We have
Yeah,
plenty
I mean,
to talk about.
we can save Duskmore for our one of 2 spoiler episodes.
You know what? We can also save Pioneer for next week. We'll talk about. We'll
Exactly.
check in on Pioneer next
There's
week.
next week's episode.
Guys,
we don't
next
even have to
week's
make a new
episode
note.
is
We already got it.
written.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
I'm
it's
so
done.
happy. I'm so happy.
God,
It's only gonna be
shame.
an hour and a half edit then. I
Yeah.
love
Whose
it.
side do you think we're on?
So yeah.
So I'm taking control of this podcast, and I am saying, and with that, that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review and a rating. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast or reach out, you can tweet at us at the Dive Down, all one word, or email the divedown@gmail.com. You can also go support Devon, go watch him on Twitch. You can look at Stan's articles on Polygon, all those things. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. Also, check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Head over to heavyplay.com to get some incredible deck and dice boxes, playmats featuring the EquipMag system. Use code TheDiveDown2024 for 10% off your first order. Also, shout out to manatraders.com for sponsoring the Dive Down. Sign up for Manatraders using the promo code TheDiveDown_F7, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic online cards. And save money on paper cards over at Nerd Rage Gaming with code DIVE8 for 8% off your order. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there. And the Fitness Gram Pacer test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test that progressively gets more difficult as it continues. The 20-meter pacer test will begin in 30 seconds. Line up at the start. The running speed starts slowly but gets faster each minute after you hear the signal go boop. A single lap should be completed every time you hear this sound. Remember to run in a straight line. Run as long as possible. The second time you fail to complete a lap before the sound, your test is over. The test will begin on the word start. On your mark, get ready, start.